Hello, I'm Carol Dean, and I've produced and financed many films. I'm teaching a producing class where you can learn financing, acquiring rights, hiring crews, locations, scheduling, post-production, and a lot more. So please consider joining us.
Okay, great. Well, that's what I keep hearing is that writers need to work with other writers to get feedback. And there seems to be something about this collective group of writers working together that becomes so creative. What is that happens?
So, there's this word that often gets misused in any art form, right? Which is the word talent. I actually call it the talent trap, and it happened to most of us at some point in our career. Like a very well-meaning teacher said, hey, Tony, you're so talented. Hey, Diane, you're so talented. You have such a gift, and that person had really good intentions, but they often end up screwing us up, right? Because now instead of Tony just writing like Tony and Diane just writing like Diane, now suddenly people are trying to live up to that expectation of talent, right? And not only other people's expectations, but their own expectations. And then our identity gets wrapped up in it. Like, am I a screenwriter? Do I still have talent? Do I have as much talent as Odette, right? Like we get caught up in that talent trap. And the result of that is yes, Odette, it paralyzes you, right? And it takes away the one gift that you really have as a writer, which is your voice, right? Which is actually the only thing that anyone is buying, right? When you're a new writer, eventually there will be a time when people are buying your name, right? But at the beginning of your career, or even early in your career, people are buying your voice, right? That is the only reason to take a chance on a newer writer, is if they're giving you something that the average writer couldn't give you, or that a more experienced writer couldn't give you. So what ends up happening is, because of the talent trap, we end up losing our voice. And then, unfortunately, the way most screenwriting education works, right? And this is different. If you've taken playwriting classes, you probably studied from real playwrights, and those people have probably broken you open in wonderful ways. So if you've studied poetry, if you've studied novel writing, right, you're usually studying with real artists who kind of understand that this isn't just, you can't just feed in a bunch of craft and get a great screenplay out. And so it's my belief that if you really want to make good writers into great writers, or new writers into great writers, right, what you really need to do is, first, you have to get them past their inner censor, and you have to work to unlock their voice. And because if you don't have that, you don't have anything. And then different writers need different amounts of craft and different kinds of craft to shape their voice, right? So some people are intuitively very good at structure, right? And you don't need to pour a lot more structure onto those people, even though those are the people who want to learn more structure because it's where they feel confident, right? They might need to be pushed on dialogue, right? Whereas some people have great ear, right? And they're going to want to learn more about writing dialogue, but really they need to learn about the stuff that makes them uncomfortable. And so one of the cool things about the way that we work is that once you're through the foundation classes where you have the basics, right? And I don't mean the basics of screenwriting, I mean the basics of how I teach screenwriting. We have then a common language, and from that point forward, we're really going like, okay, well, what's Rihanna working on? Where is she struggling, right? And that might be completely different than when where Sinatrea is struggling, and where she's strong. And so it's really important to remember that this is art, and this is not one size fits all. And there's also there are obviously commercial elements, right? Which is part of the reason you guys are here for this class, right? You want to get your stuff made, right? And that's a level of it too. So the way I like to look at writing, I like to think of it as happening in 4 different phases. In the first phase, I call the me draft, right? Where it's not the vomit draft. It's actually it's a rigorous process, but it's about getting things on the page the way you see them, right? The way you hear them, the way you feel them, taking your character on the strongest journey possible. It's not worrying about whether anybody else gets it. It's worrying about, did it make you laugh? Did it make you cry, right? Is it specific? Did you see it? Did you keep looking until you saw the thing that you haven't seen before, right? So there's a rigorous process that I call the me draft. That's all about getting past your inner censor. When you're through the me draft, the second phase of writing is what I call the audience draft, right? And this is where we start to apply craft to your writing so that we can shape that beautiful, raw, messy material, right, into something that when Audra reads it, she can have the same experience that you had, right? So, which is very different from the way most people start, right? Most people start going like, I want to give Audra a great experience, right? But when we do that, we put ourselves into like the performer role, right? We're no longer just being present with our characters. We're now trying to show people something. And that tends to destroy writing in early writers. So we go through the me draft, we go through the audience draft. The third phase of writing is what I call the producer draft, right? And in the producer draft, what we're really doing is we're turning your script into a walking sales pitch for itself, right? And the way I want you to think of the producer draft is like, this is not where you sell out, right? This is where you sell in. It's my belief that you can't make it through these first two phases without writing something freaking awesome, right? If there wasn't something awesome there, there would be no hook for you, right? You wouldn't have finished it. So my belief is in the producer draft, what we really do is we go like, well, what's already really cool about this, right? And how do we turn up the volume of that? How do we do more of that and less of everything else, right? Or let's say you have a character who's a little flat, right? Let's say we've all had this experience of writing somebody, right? And they're just like, they're not fully alive yet. You know, let's say you've written Carol, right? She's your character, but she doesn't feel like Carol, right? You can barely tell the difference between Carol and Lorenzo, right? They kind of talk the same, right? So in the producer draft, what we would actually do is we would look and we'd look really deeply, and maybe we find like one really cool line of Carol's, and we're like, oh my God, that's so Carol. That line is so Carol, right? And then what we can do is we can build off of that line to go, well, how do we give Carol more lines like this, right? And then once we've established that pattern, we can start to riff on it. And by the time we're done, anyone can basically go, oh, you know what's really cool about Carol? And say it like that. And so what we're actually doing in the producer draft is we're finding what's already cool, and then we are compressing and amplifying around that